Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. When Donald Trump first started talking about Greenland years ago, most people laughed it off. It sounded like a joke, or at best, a bizarre distraction. Buying Greenland from Denmark, it fit perfectly into the media narrative of Trump as impulsive, unserious, and detached from reality. But what happened recently in Davos should force us to reconsider that assumption. Because this time, Trump didn't just repeat an old talking point. He framed it as something much bigger. Not a land deal, not a symbolic provocation, but part of a broader discussion about security, responsibility, and the future of the Arctic. And more importantly, he wasn't contradicted. He wasn't dismissed. He wasn't openly challenged by NATO leadership or European officials. Instead, what we saw was something far more telling: careful language, strategic ambiguity, and quiet acknowledgement that a deeper conversation is already underway. To be clear, there is no public treaty, no signed agreement, no formal announcement that Greenland is changing hands. Anyone claiming that would be overstating the evidence. But that doesn't mean nothing is happening. In international politics, especially at the strategic level, outcomes are often decided long before paperwork appears. What matters is not whether a deal has been finalized, but whether a shared direction is forming. And that's what makes this moment significant. Trump's comments in Davos weren't about Greenland as territory. They were about the Arctic as a strategic space. That distinction matters. Greenland is not valuable because of its population or its economy. It's valuable because of where it sits, between North America, Europe, and the polar routes that are becoming increasingly important as ice melts and global competition intensifies. From missile early warning systems to undersea cables, from air defense to future shipping lanes, the Arctic is no longer a peripheral region. It's becoming a core arena of great power rivalry. For the United States, this is not a new realization. American military planners have been warning about the Arctic for years. Russia has been rebuilding bases, deploying icebreakers, and treating the region as a strategic extension of its territory. China, while not an Arctic state, has been expanding its presence through research missions, infrastructure investments, and diplomatic positioning, openly describing itself as a near-Arctic power. From Washington's perspective, the trend is obvious. If the Arctic is left politically fragmented and militarily underdefended, it will eventually be shaped by actors whose interests are not aligned with the transatlantic alliance. This is where Europe enters the picture, and this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable. European countries benefit enormously from the U.S. security umbrella, including in the Arctic, but they lack the capacity, and often the political will, to independently manage Arctic defense at scale. Denmark technically controls Greenland, but Denmark does not have the military resources to secure it against major power pressure. NATO as an institution has struggled for years to translate Arctic awareness into concrete capability. And the European Union, despite its rhetoric, is largely a bystander when it comes to hard security in the far north. So when Trump frames Greenland not as a purchase, but as part of a broader security responsibility, the subtext is clear. The United States is saying, if we are expected to carry the burden of Arctic defense, then we need the authority, access, and control to do so effectively. That doesn't necessarily mean annexation. It doesn't even necessarily mean formal sovereignty. But it does mean a rebalancing of who actually makes decisions in the region. What made the Davos moment striking was not Trump's rhetoric, but the response, or rather, the lack of outright rejection. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte did not deny that such discussions exist. He did not call the idea reckless or absurd. Instead, he emphasized the growing threats in the Arctic pointed directly to Russia and China, and acknowledged that without American leadership, Europe would not be adequately prepared. That matters, because NATO leaders are extremely careful with language. Silence, in this context, is not neutrality, it's acknowledgement. Danish officials, meanwhile, responded with caution. They stressed that Greenland is not for sale. They emphasized diplomacy and continued dialogue. They reassured domestic audiences that no military action was being considered, but they also avoided drawing hard red lines. And they repeatedly referenced the same concern Trump raised: external interest in the Arctic, especially from China. This pattern tells us something important. Europe may not like the framing, but it also knows it has limited leverage. The choice is not between American involvement and full European control. The real choice is between structured American leadership within the alliance or gradual strategic erosion as other powers expand their influence. Trump's negotiating style makes this dynamic more visible, not more extreme. He says the quiet part out loud. He uses blunt pressure, tariffs, public statements, deadlines, to force conversations that would otherwise remain buried in bureaucratic language. That approach is chaotic and often politically costly, but it is not irrational. In this case, it appears to have accelerated a process that was already moving beneath the surface. It's also important to understand why Greenland keeps coming up specifically. Historically, the United States has viewed Greenland as strategically essential. During the Cold War, it was a key node in early warning systems against Soviet missiles. That logic hasn't disappeared. If anything, it has become more relevant in an era of hypersonic weapons and renewed great power competition. Geography doesn't change. What changes is how seriously states take it. The deeper issue here is not whether Europe agrees with Trump's tone. It's whether Europe can realistically offer an alternative. So far, the answer appears to be no. European defense spending remains uneven, Arctic coordination remains fragmented, and political consensus on long-term strategic risk is weak. In that environment, American dominance becomes the default, not because it's universally welcomed, but because it's the only option that exists. That's why framing this situation as a simple power grab misses the point. This is not about the U.S. taking Greenland. It's about the gradual centralization of Arctic security under American leadership with European acquiescence. Driven by shared fear of external competitors and internal incapacity to respond independently. None of this means the outcome is settled. Domestic politics in Denmark matter. European public opinion matters. Future U.S. administrations could shift tone or priorities. But the direction is becoming harder to ignore. The Arctic is moving from the margins of Western security thinking to its center, and that transition favors the actor with the most resources, the most reach, and the greatest willingness to act decisively. The real risk for Europe is not that the United States becomes too dominant. It's that Europe becomes structurally irrelevant in a region that will shape future trade routes, military balances, and technological infrastructure. Accepting American leadership may feel like a loss of autonomy, but failing to engage meaningfully may result in something worse: exclusion. So when Trump talks about Greenland, the question we should be asking is not whether the idea sounds outrageous. The question is whether Europe has a credible alternative plan for the Arctic. And so far, that plan has yet to materialize. What we are witnessing is not a completed deal, but a shift in strategic gravity. A moment where informal consensus begins to solidify, where ambiguity serves as a bridge between resistance and acceptance. These are the moments that shape international order, long before headlines catch up. And if history is any guide, by the time the paperwork arrives, the real decisions will already have been made.